Hey guys, TCG here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about what should you play and what should you not play in Branded. But before we get into the video, if you could please like and subscribe to the channel, it would help a lot as I continue to grow and make better content. I will soon be starting up a Patreon and a Discord to which you can get exclusive access to the Discord member-only channels, early access to deck lists that I take to locals for a given deck, requests certain contents and discussions, and so much more. Without further ado, let's get into the video. I'm going to start off with the elephant in the room. Do we play Gimmick Puppet Nightmare? To which the answer to this is a very resounding no. Now, this might come off as controversial to a lot of Branded players, and a lot of people in general. I think it's personally too specific to go for in anything with a side deck. The card is a brick. If you draw him, he's just in your hand. I mean, it makes your discard choice easier, but you typically don't want a card that does nothing in your hand. And it's just, I think the card requires a little too much setup for a much weaker variant. Of what your end board could be. And I think it's about time we start to move away from Puppet and Ido and into just focusing on making our really absurd Branded end boards. I think the deck will get a lot better if we move away from Puppet. And honestly, it's just, I feel like it's just not worth it in the main. In the side, maybe. But I could argue that now you could cut the card and be just fine. But I don't know if that's going to be my controversial take or not. Feel free to discuss with me on these takes, by the way, what you think about it. With Puppet out of the way, let's move on to a card I think you guys should be playing. And can even be played over Puppet Nightmare. And that is Branded Banishment. This is a card that should be in, I think, either your main or your side deck. And it becomes even better when you know you're playing against light or dark decks, specifically decks that summon a lot of darks. Or leave a fusion monster on board that's a light and they have a dark. You get the point. But for those of you who don't know, Branded Banishment targets a SP monster or level 8 or higher fusion monster in your graveyard, specials it, and then super polys by banishing instead of sending to graveyard, which is a very great effect, and this card is very useful in the mirror match. And I personally think that this card is really bonkers and that a lot of Branded players are actually really sleeping on this card. This is an amazing removal tool, and it can climb stuff like Chaos Angel very easily. That's properly made, and it's just a very insane card to have, especially if you know your opponent's on a light or dark deck. That's why I think it can be mainboarded, but should be sideboarded. And if you main deck it, I think it would be in slot of Puppet Nightmare, or you should be playing Dark Magician instead of Puppet if you want to play a brick for a payoff. Now I'm going to talk about the Bestials. How many should you main and how many should you side? Well, I think you should only be mainboarding the two Bestials that are currently seeing play in the deck. And that is Bestial Magnemite and, or not Bestial Magnemite, Bestial Lubellion and the Bestial Serenir. I think those two are the extent of the Bestials that you need to mainboard in Branded. This number changes if you're playing the Synchro variant, but I think Pure Fusion is always going to be a little stronger and more what the deck was made for. Plus, I think Bestial Branded is a little brickier too. And I feel like Serenir and Lubellion just actually like advance your plays a lot more, help with recovery in the long term, and are just generally better cards for the archetype that actually help the archetype. Because sending the Bestial Lubellion off of a Branded Fusion is absolutely amazing, because now you're guaranteed access to Lost, plus whatever else you have. And so there's also, if you want to, you can side deck Etude of the Branded. If you know that the Macrocosmos is worth the chance of drawing it and not having a Bestial. As for the side deck, I think you only need to play 2 Magnemut, 1 Druid's Worm. It's still very good to have these in the side deck in order to counter light and dark strategies that need something to be in the graveyard. And they're just generically really good cards. They're big beat sticks at worst that cause removal. And at best, they are an interruption in Search of Fallen of Albaz, too. Of a Magnemite. But I don't think we need to go overkill on them, especially because we're not in a super heavy light or dark graveyard format. But there are some decks that just lose to these. And they're just very good to have, but I don't think we need more than that. Now, should we be playing Super Polymerization? This is one that I hear a fair amount of discourse on as to whether we should or should not play this card. Personally, I'm in the side of no, we should not be playing Super Poly this format. Extra deck space is very tight, as it is, which makes it hard to find room for 2 of the best or 3 of the best targets, which I think are Garura, Muddragon, and Starving Venom, because we should already be playing Dragostapelia. And I think that personally, this format, we just don't get enough off Super Poly to warrant it. Also, we don't get enough off Super Poly and the discard that we're required to do in a deck that already has a very fair amount of discarding. Because opening makes you discard, Lubellion makes you discard, other effects make you discard. If you go for Dragoon, that's a discard. And it's sometimes you find yourself a little small on hand resources if your hand is awkward. So I personally believe that also the format isn't really kind to Super Poly either. And that's another thing about Super Poly is that it's not kind. The format's not really kind to it. Kashtira is, if they sit on a Rise Heart, then I mean, there's a very free Super Poly with whatever you summon. But for the most part, the format's not really being kind to Super Poly. It's an okay board breaker at best, but we're not really gaining anything off of it. We gain more by having those 2 or 3 extra deck spots for the 3 I mentioned, and the discard cost can be really rough at times. Now, which hand traps should we be playing in Branded, and how many? Personally, I have loved having 3 Ash and 3 Infinite Impermanence and nothing more. No Droll, because I feel like it is seeing its way out of the format. And there's not as many decks that just die to it. Super Heavy I haven't seen run as rampant, and this is built for my locals. I found Ash and Infinite Impermanence to be just the most generically useful hand traps right now. And I also run into the mirror match a lot too, so obviously having this, and if they don't have cross out, they lose. Or if you have cross out, they lose, is really nice. Imperm is just very good to stop a few things. There's a lot. And I think that your hand trap lineup should depend on your local scene. If you're still running into a lot of search heavy decks, a lot of super heavy decks, then Droll might be for you, and you can cut down on Ash and cut down on Imperm. But if your local scene is like mine, where Droll isn't doing as much anymore, Droll's almost completely gone, then I think you should run 3 of each. You could argue 2 of Ash, but I like 3 just to have it as an interruption. And while I'm here, I'll answer my thoughts on Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. I think the card is a very good hand trap that should have honestly seen more like experimentation a long while ago. But it is very, very good against this deck in particular because it can stop an Allure that was summoned in draw phase, whereas Effect Veiler cannot. And then this is more for the budget players. The Patchwork Engine, or versus Keeper of Dragon Magic and the Predaplant Dragostapelia engine. Or not Predaplant Dragostapelia, just Predaplant engine in general. Personally, I think in terms of affordability, the Patchwork engine is more affordable. But if you play Keeper, then in the Predaplant engine, I think it's better as long as you can afford Dragoon, which is what this one is essentially supposed to turbo out. And whether these cards should have any place in an actual like current modern format branded list, I think these should not be played unless you're on an extreme budget. In which case, both of these engines can get you a lot of mileage if you're willing to put in the money for Dragoon. More so Dragoon for the Predaplant and Keeper engine. I personally think that these are the best engines for the budget players only. Which Patchwork engine is not bad. But it's just the deck, Brandon can do so much more now. You don't want to risk breaking on this engine and breaking on the polys. Just not drawing anything you can do. That's when I was playing Patchwork build back in like Dabble format. I kept breaking a lot on this. And while it's a really good engine, I think it should specifically be kept for budget players. Same with Keeper Dragon Magic, especially because the discard cost is really heavy in normal branded too, and it takes up your normal, which you probably always just want to see a Lure over this card anyways as your normal summon, because he can do what Keeper does, except he can actually just do it without a discard. The big thing about a lot of these cards is discard as well, and we discard a fair amount, especially if you're, like I said, playing Dragoon. You discard for him, you discard for Rebellion, you discard for opening. You would also have to discard for him, and sometimes you lose a lot of card economy in the process. There's a card that I forgot to put up here on the stack, but Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Should you be playing Dragoon? I think, personally, not at the current moment. However, in Battles of Legend Monstrous Revenge, there are a couple cards that are coming out that I'll get to after I explain Dragoon that I think completely changed my stance on this, and honestly are going to change how I view ways of deck building branded Despia. But for now, Dragoon I think is not worth the investment to make in a format where Kaijus are still present, Lava Golem is still present. And overall, I generally think that while Dragoon is a very sick boss monster and an Omni Negate is something that Branded desperately needs, it isn't worth it to alter your Branded Fusion playlines to accommodate this, or to go for any additional setup or deck build around him. When, yeah, Kaijus are still in the format. Golem, I've seen Golem a lot. Less so Raw Sphere mode, because more people are willing to just put up, like, 2 boards. And do not get me wrong, Dragoon is a very good card, and some decks just cannot out it. Some decks are just absolutely not able to out that. And it is a very, very impressive card. But it's, again, I think the format isn't being particularly kind to him, aside from some matchups just not being able to get rid of him. But the cards that I think change everything that come out in Battles of Legend Monstrous Revenge. They are called Duality and Shadow's Light. Duality is a card. I'm going to paraphrase the card text a little because I don't have it memorized yet. That allows you to tribute one light or dark monster and then special summon a monster with the opposite attribute but the same level from your hand or extra deck. And then as a secondary effect, that it is allowed to target one light and one dark monster in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, and then draw a card. So it's also recursion too. And then Shadow's Light allows you to target a dark monster you control, and if I remember correctly, it's able to special one from the hand, and in addition, you're able to normal summon a lighter dark monster in addition to your normal summon set that turn. I think this will also see very, very much play in Branded. I think these two cards change so much and open up a new world of possibilities. This makes Dragoon especially accessible because now you can turn something like a Grand Guignol into a Dragoon while keeping her in graveyard to tag out. These cards don't come out for another couple of weeks, but I already pre-ordered my playset of both of them, and I'm really excited to see what I can cook up and what the most useful stuff is with these cards, and I just think that they are going to change so much for the deck. And you're now able to turn a Luber into a Herald of Arclight, which is really, really painful to some decks. And there's just, I think, infinite possibilities for these cards. And I'm really excited to give them a try in Branded because I think specifically they'll find a home in Branded. In particular, as I think we are probably the best light dark deck in the format. Labyrinth is obviously able to play lights and darks, but they'd, I think, rather keep Lady Labyrinth around rather than try Dragoon shenanigans or anything else. But Duality also being a quick play spell is also really bonkers, because you can do this in response to an opponent's card effect that targets. And the one I've already mentioned is Grand Guignol to Dragoon. Well, you summon Grand Guignol, they try and Imperm Baylor Ash, or something like that, that for whatever reason they didn't do on Cartesia. Then you just chain it, tribute it, summon Dragoon, and now you're able to just do it. You now have an Omni to get on board, and you dodge their target negation, and then you got this on top of that. Now, if they special summon Grand Guignol's in your grave, you can banish her to summon it. So I think overall these cards are going to be very game changing. The last thing that I want to mention for Branded is another card that I forgot to put in here. Fusion Duplication. I've seen some Branded players experiment with this. Some of them half jokingly, some of them swearing by it. I think it's a bunch of copium, if I'm being completely honest. I think it's very cope. I don't think the card is good at all, and I think it's not worth running a non-searchable thing, even if you're running Thrust to search it. I just do not believe that it's worth it for the fusion on your opponent's turn, which will turn on their triple tactics, their thrusts. I do not think it's worth it. Being able to copy a fusion spell effect is very powerful, or a quick play poly spell, but I don't think it's worth it just for another use of Branded Fusion, or just for another usage of or another usage of Super Poly, which would now require you to discard two. So yeah, I think personally it's absolute cope, but I know some Branded players are swearing by it by their life. So please feel free to let me know what it is you think about that in the comments. If you played it, is it worth it? But that's all for the video today, and thank you guys for watching and sticking with me through this like 19-minute lecture of why you shouldn't play like any of this in branded. I really appreciate that for those of you who made it to the end, and if you would please consider liking and subscribing, it would help the channel a lot. The content will continue to get better and better as time goes on. I am getting a bigger desk soon, and I am going to be having my Steam Deck set up as a PC, so I'll even be able to stream Master Duel up to 4 times a week. I plan to stream the Girl Power Master Duel tournament for the Girl Power server I'm in. That's going to be on, if I remember correctly, the 26th. Or something along those lines. But stay tuned. I will be playing branded at that, so make sure to tune in on that day. So that way you can witness one of my first like major results if I win. And I think I will. I'm pretty confident, but not cocky. But thank you all for watching and have a great night, and I will see you on the flip side.